shadows of Madison, Ohio. Part 5. I don't know if it was desperation, defiance, or plain madness, but after leaving the bar, I found myself heading back to the hospital. The fog was thicker now, clinging to the streets, and the wind carried a faint, metallic scent. The shadows seemed to pulse, growing darker and more menacing with every step. When I reached the hospital doors, they creaked open with an eerie familiarity, as if they'd been expecting me. My flashlight flickered, its beam thin and feeble against the blackness, but I pressed on. I retraced my steps to the basement stairs, descending slowly, the cold air biting at my skin. The hallways below seemed narrower, the darkness denser, and each creak of the floor echoed like a heartbeat. I knew exactly where I was going, back to the room with the strange symbol etched into the table. I had a hunch it was the key to understanding this place, to finding the root of Madison's curse. I reached the room, and there it was, the cross and circle, with the four dots glinting in the flashlight beam. But something was different this time. The air felt charged, humming with a low vibration that made my skin prickle. As I moved closer to the table, I noticed something on the floor, a faint chalk line running along the edges of the room, forming an unbroken circle around the table. The hairs on my arms stood up. I'd heard of protective circles, wars against dark forces, but I'd never seen one in person. Whoever had drawn this circle had known exactly what they were dealing with. Then, I heard a low, distant wail echoing through the basement halls. It was faint at first, almost like a whisper, but it grew louder, rising and falling in eerie, rhythmic waves. I froze, my heart pounding as the sound filled the room, reverberating off the walls, as if something ancient and angry had been awakened. And then a voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." I whipped around, my flashlight sweeping over the shadows, but no one was there. The voice seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere at once, a chilling, disembodied presence. "You're in my place," it hissed, each word dripping with malice. "You took my land, my children." The shadows around me shifted, moving as if alive. My flashlight flickered, the beam cutting in and out, but in those brief flashes of light, I saw them faces, twisted and contorted in agony, eyes wide with terror and mouths frozen in silent screams. They hovered at the edges of the light, disappearing whenever the beam touched them, only to reappear when darkness reclaimed the space. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I stammered, backing up until I felt the cold metal of the table press against my back. A low, mocking laugh echoed through the room. "I am the curse you brought upon this place, the punishment for your sins." The fog seemed to seep into the room, swirling around my ankles and creeping up my legs, binding me in place. I felt something cold and wet brush against my skin, and when I looked down, I saw a dark, skeletal hands reaching up from the floor, grasping, clawing at my legs. I tried to pull away, but the hands held fast, their grip tightening, dragging me down. "No," I screamed, thrashing against the invisible force, but the hands only pulled harder, their grip icy and unyielding. I felt myself sinking, my legs vanishing into the floor, as if the very ground had opened up to swallow me. And then, just as suddenly, the hands released me. I fell to the floor, gasping for air, my heart hammering in my chest. The fog receded, and the room fell silent once more. I scrambled to my feet, backing away from the table, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't stay here. Whatever force haunted this place was beyond anything I could comprehend. An ancient wrath bound to the land itself. As I turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of the table, the symbol glowing faintly, a pulsating light that seemed to come from deep within the metal. And in that moment, I understood. The symbol wasn't just a mark, it was a seal, a barrier holding something back, something that was now dangerously close to breaking free. I bolted out of the room, racing down the hallway, my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. The wails followed me, growing louder, more frenzied, until they were deafening, filling my ears with a cacophony of anguish. I stumbled up the stairs, barely able to see through the fog and shadows that clung to me like a second skin. When I burst out of the hospital, the fog was so thick I could barely see the street ahead of me. I didn't stop running, didn't look back until I reached my car. As I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. In the hospital's doorway, a shadow stood, a tall, cloaked figure, its face obscured by darkness. It watched me, unmoving, its presence radiating a palpable, bone-chilling hatred. And then, slowly, it raised a hand, pointing directly at me. I scrambled into the car, slamming the door and peeling out of the parking lot. I drove as fast as I could, not daring to look back. The fog pursued me, clinging to the car, wrapping around it like a shroud as I sped down the empty streets. Finally, as I crossed the town's edge, the fog lifted, evaporating into the night air. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, the lights of Madison just a faint glow in the rearview mirror. But even as I put distance between myself and that cursed town, I knew I wasn't truly free. Madison's shadows had followed me, clinging to me like a dark stain. And deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen something I was never meant to see, and Madison would not let me forget.